Hello there, and welcome to the Feeling Lighter podcast. I'm Coach Tyler. Today, as always, with Dr. Lisa. How are you?
Wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing good today.
Good.
Happy that we're getting to record this podcast today because so many people get stuck with this question, right? What's the right diet for me? Which diet's going to help me the most, right?
Yeah.
And we're hoping that this episode can give you a little more clarity and make you feel a little lighter at the end of it. Right?
Oh, it will. It will. We're excited because I get to introduce my friend. We actually are in Charlotte, North Carolina together, and it's just been a really great resource in the community that I serve as a physical therapist, primarily working with people in eating disorder recovery and in large bodies. And, this is just her wheelhouse. So welcome, Christy Maloney, to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Absolutely. We like to start, we don't read the bios and do all that. We like our guests to sort of introduce themselves, what they do, how they got to the work, so that our, listeners kind of have an understanding of your, where you're coming from and how your education and training can actually help them with different things they're going on.
Yeah. So, going not too far back, but my degree that I first got was in psychology, my bachelor's degree. And then in Charlotte, I worked in banking for, 4 or 5 years, because that's what we do here. It's a big banking hub.
That is true.
And so then when I was crying every single day on the way to work to my mother, telling her that I could not do this the rest of my life, I went back to school to be a dietitian. So got my degree in nutrition, did the dietetic internship, and then I've been a dietitian since 2011. So the degrees in psychology and nutrition helped me kind of together, of course, understanding how to take the nutrition science and apply it, from person to person, because we're all individual, and the way we retain information and, kind of take it in is helpful to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
But so after that, I worked in clinical care in hospitals for 2 years. So that was kind of like learning a little bit of everything and learning the clinical side of things, the kind of nuts and bolts of, labs and disease states and things like that. After that, I worked at an eating disorder treatment facility for 4 years, which really gave me a lot of, valuable education and on-the-job experience of eating disorders and working with eating disorders, and, just kind of understanding how they affect people kind of holistically in their bodies and their lives and everything. So then I have been in private practice since December of 2016. So that's, what is that, a little over 8 years, which is wild to me. The first 2 years I was working for somebody else as a contractor. And then for the last 6 years, actually tomorrow is our 6-year business anniversary.
Yay.
Yeah, I know, I'm excited. I've had my company, Enhanced Nutrition Associates. So we are a team of dietitians that we treat eating disorders. I primarily treat eating disorders. That's what my patients are, in addition to PCOS, which is a passion project of mine because I also have PCOS. But we, again, treat people with eating disorders, disordered eating. We do medical nutrition therapy from a weight neutral perspective. So just meaning that we don't focus on weight as necessarily a health metric or weight loss as an outcome, but focusing on, healthy behaviors and, helping a person really define what health means to them outside of what diet culture has told us that health should be to them. So doing that and, really working with people if they have high cholesterol, like what foods can we add in to make that better versus you have to lose weight in order to make that better, because we all know weight loss doesn't necessarily always come with healthy behaviors. So we serve 20 states that we're licensed in. We take multiple insurances. And we offer virtual appointments and then in-person appointments across 5 different office locations. And it's a passion of mine to make treatment accessible by taking insurance. And then we offer, everybody has slots on their caseload for sliding scale and that kind of thing, because we don't want cost to be a barrier. But that's the long of it, I guess.
No, that is great.
We need more conscious capitalism in this world.
Right.
People are actually trying to serve people and make sure that's inclusive across the board. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think a lot of people still have this notion in their minds that there's like the best diet and it's yet to come, right? And I think a lot of this comes from the way society basically pitches diets to us over and over again as the latest, greatest, most researched, backed thing. So when somebody comes in to work with you and they have that mindset, how do you begin to unwind that?
Yeah, my very first question is always, but how did you arrive at that? Why is this diet the thing? Why is this the way to eat? What informed you of this? What research do you have to support it, right? Like I always say, you can change my mind on anything if you show me evidence and data,
Right.
But, I want to look at what informed that opinion. And then, from that perspective, it's not my goal to tell somebody like, hey, you're wrong, you're doing this wrong, my way is the best way. But to kind of sit down with that person and say like, okay, so what drew you to this diet that you think is like the best thing? What aspects of that feel good and what aspects of this diet like don't feel good? And how can we use the things that feel good to maybe be a catalyst for behavior, like healthy behaviors, health promoting behaviors? So it's kind of drilling down into that and getting all of the, backstory behind it, and then helping that person kind of see like, okay, so if it's based on you and your psychology and your lifestyle and your financial resources and your health, indicators, what do we need to do for you? And I find that tends to work well for people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because, to your point about diets and this idea that like, oh, this is going to be the thing that unlocks optimal health for everyone or for a large amount of people, this stuff is really individual. And when we drill down to like what you're actually here for, like what is it we're trying to achieve, what are the actual health concerns, then it's a whole different like list of stuff, and it's not encompassed in any diet, because there is no diet that makes sense for anybody or any group of people. I'm very curious when you switch though, like I assume you were very traditionally trained as a dietitian, and,
100%.
and there probably was a time when people would come to you and you would probably give them a restrictive meal plan or diet of sorts. So
100%.
when did that shift happen for you, and what sort of inspired it?
When I worked at the place that I contracted at previously, so I had worked at an eating disorder treatment facility, and at that point it was 2013, 2014. The health at every size movement was just like gaining some traction. This idea that weight doesn't define your health was just becoming an idea. So there was sort of aspects of that I integrated into that work. But then when I left to go contract for somebody else, I was treating people with eating disorders, but then also simultaneously seeing people for weight management. Right. And so now 2025, Christy looks back on that like, oh no, this is a bad decision. But 2016, 2017, Christy was like, oh, I'm helping these people with their eating disorder. I'm helping these people with their health. But then as I went through that job, I started noticing, if I was working with a client on weight loss and they would come in and we would go to the scale and we would weigh them, and their mood and demeanor for that whole hour was dependent on that number. And if that number was up, they didn't hear a word I said the whole hour. And so I was just like, this is one, it makes me feel icky weighing a grown person and telling them you did a good or a bad job. That just started feeling really gross to me.
Yeah.
And then I was sitting there just thinking, like, they're not listening to what I'm saying anyway. Like, what is the point of this? So it was kind of through that I really started to shift behaviors. And, the place I was at then was very weight loss focused. And then it really just became the juxtaposition of, I want to practice from, a healthy mind and body standpoint, not weight focused, to what they were doing, which was weight loss programs. And I just said, you know what, I gotta go. Like, it's too opposing at this point. So that was when I left and started Enhance. So I didn't have to do that anymore.
That's so good for you. And I can imagine that you're sitting with one group of people, cautioning them from diet-like behaviors because they're disordered and they're leading into more disordered behaviors, and then you're working with a separate group that you are encouraging in some ways to those same behaviors.
Right.
And so I could see it being such a conflict. Like, what are we doing? Like, it's almost like you're prepping this group to be in your other group later.
Right.
Right.
Talk about a marketing funnel, right?
Right. It's like, I will always have job security. Okay.
Right. Yeah, and it's so true. I don't know. In my brain at that time, I was just like, oh, I can do these two opposing things.
Yeah.
And they're two different groups of people, and that's okay. But over time, it was not okay.
Yeah.
And I regret, any harm I inflicted upon people, encouraging them in weight loss. But I kind of definitely live by, when you know better, you do better. So
100%.
that's what I've been trying to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've all done that. We've all encouraged that harm. I did a series on my social media a couple years ago where I was like, I apologize too, and sort of broke down some of the demographics of clients I was seeing and things I would say to them, that definitely caused harm, whether they knew it then or now or not. But that is real. We cause real harm, but it's because we don't know any different. It's how we're trained, and it's how most of the world believes. So it just makes good sense until it doesn't. So
Are you trying to shame me into making an amends post right now? Is that what's going on?
do you need one?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Is that
I made
what
a lot of
needs to
mistakes.
happen?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
all did.
But when you know better, you do better.
Hopefully.
Right?
That's right.
So,
That's
Exactly.
yeah.
And I mean, going to school to be a dietitian, oh my gosh, right? Like,
The name is in the diet is in the
diet's
name.
right there. And like 95% of dietitians are white women. It's a very sort of like homogenous field. It's been historically always sort of like weight focused, obviously, and very sort of like Eurocentric diet kind of stuff. We don't get a lot of culture. We don't get a lot of anything outside of weight. Well, historically, when I was in school, which has been a while, didn't get much outside of just like control for weight, and everything else is fine. So it took a lot of unlearning and learning to get past that traditional education.
Yeah. And that's why I applaud you for that, because I think it's much easier to just stay in that, that pathway. It just makes sense because that's what everybody else is doing. And I'm sure it was lucrative in some ways, so
Absolutely.
kudos to you for stepping out and doing something very much against the grain, for sure.
Thank you.
I'm curious what you see people being mentally stuck in the most as they show up in your practice, because to me it's those beliefs underneath our decisions and actions that ultimately shape our lives. And if we're always in that belief system of I have to be skinny to be healthy, or I have to be skinny to be valuable even, then we're going to make a lot of decisions based on that ultimately aren't going to serve our bodies and our health in the long run. So what do you see people coming in with in terms of that underlying beliefs and the things that they keep telling themselves that keeps them trapped in that diet culture?
Well, I think especially, so I'm 43, right? So especially for people, women that are my age, we grew up, and let me caveat that by saying I see primarily adults and a lot of sort of like perimenopause, menopausal age, just by nature of that's where I'm at in life. So that's kind of what I attract, which is great. But so with that particular population, I see a lot of people that came in with the same upbringing that I did, and my mom was great. Like, I'm not trying to talk bad about my mom, but I watched her diet. I watched her eat the grapefruit for breakfast and lunch. I watched her, do low fat. I watched her go to Weight Watchers. I learned from her, and then from like comments around, that weight must be very important, right? If my mom's eating half a grapefruit for breakfast, like, grapefruit is not great. I hate it. It's the worst fruit. I'm like, she must really be, like, this must be important if we're doing all that.
Give her an orange or an apple or something, right?
Do something different. Do y'all remember the grapefruit diet? Do you know what I'm talking about?
100%. I've done the grapefruit diet. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Grapefruit to me tastes like you're licking armpit. Like, I can't take it. There's something about, like, the enzymes. I can't do it. So that for me was really like, oh, she's sacrificing, right?
Yeah.
Which gave me a big message. And so I've found that, women late 30s, 40s, 50s, we all kind of grew up collectively with that mindset. It's what we saw our moms doing. and I don't want to throw shade at moms. It wasn't just
No,
moms.
they were
Sometimes it
doing
was
what they
dads
thought.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was society. It was, just kind of what people did. So we learned that you should go to any means necessary to control your weight.
Yeah.
And so at this point, what I'm seeing, with sort of women in midlife is that there's this sort of dissonance between, well, I learned when I was young that weight should be controlled no matter what I have to do. But I'm listening to the newer message of weight, like weight doesn't equal health and weight does not have to define me, right? So it's the dissonance between those things, and people that really want to believe and really love the idea that weight doesn't define them or their health, but have these beliefs that they're battling, right? And we see so many messages from, oh, my mom said this about my food, or my mom restricted my food when I was in high school, or my dad made this comment about my legs, those things that just don't go away. So despite how much somebody wants to let that go, it's those thoughts that are kind of like emblazoned in their memory that are kind of holding them back. That's a huge point where I see people being stuck. I think the other thing that I really see is that, our medical system, I have a lot to say about our medical system and our insurance system, but I will spare you all my opinions. But it's very weight centric. It's really hard for somebody who has heard, even from their pediatrician on up, like, hey, you should lose weight. Hey, you're too high on your growth curve. You need to, I don't know, eat less and go outside and run as a little kid, or, as an adult, you go to the doctor. And this is a true story. So I am a larger bodied person, and I went to the doctor one time for an ear infection and got told to lose weight. So those kinds of things, when you hear those from, highly revered, educated medical professionals, it is really hard to unhear that. Yeah. And I can't tell you the number of times I've had somebody come into my office in tears from something that happened at the doctor where they were shamed about their weight, or they weren't listened to because of their weight, right? So then it takes time for us to undo but it's okay, right? Like, it doesn't have to be about your weight, and kind of bring them back. And that tends to be, a place that I really see people stuck.
Yeah.
That's big. That's so big.
I think, well, I want to talk about your body image work too, but I really think I would love to, if we could kind of let our listeners know what that looks like when they come into a space, and, whether they're stuck or not, we get to that point. What does it look like when you're working with a dietitian and you're not focused on weight? Like, what are we? Because I think, again, just from diet being in the name of what you do, I think I have only had people ask me about dietary services when they were concerned about losing weight. Like, that's just the natural progression. So what does it even look like, and what does it even mean, and what is even the value? I know there's immense value, but share with our listeners what the immense value is in seeking a dietitian, especially someone like you in your practice who is weight neutral. What are they even looking for? What can they expect to improve from that service?
Yeah, so whenever somebody comes in, we do, like every medical provider, a full assessment of, what's your medical history, what medications are you taking, what is your lifestyle like, what do you eat, what can you afford, what do you have time to cook, what is your movement like, what movement do you like, are you working 2 jobs because everything's expensive, do you even have time to move, and I know, Lisa, I'm sure you see that a lot as well, like, what do we actually have time for? So when you come in, it's not, we go straight to the scale and say, like, okay, in a month, your goal is to lose X amount of pounds. At a first assessment with a weight neutral dietitian, we would say, okay, so your cholesterol is a little high. How do we want to address that? Here are the things we can do. What of those interventions do you want to do? Or if we have diabetes where someone has a really high A1C, maybe it's a little bit of education around, like, hey, if you're having like this thing in the day, it might be more optimal if you pair it with protein, or if you move some things around in your day for better blood sugar control, versus, well, if you lose some weight, your A1C is going to go down. It's the actual healthy behaviors that we're focused on. I think the other piece of that is in seeing a weight neutral dietitian is, and I think this kind of comes back to what, the first question is talking about what is the optimal diet, and spoiler alert, there's not one, but we can help people figure out what is the optimal way of eating for them, what honors their culture and their preferences and their health history and is sustainable and that they like. And I feel like a lot of people really don't have any concept of how to put all of those things together.
No.
So that's, what we can help with. And then, a large part of our work is, of course, focused on relationship with food and getting from that place where, it's just so exhausting to even think about food, but kind of coming into that food neutral space where it's not good food or bad food, it's just food. And how do we use that to nourish ourselves? Just from a very neutral perspective. And, that kind of counter to traditional dietetics, which is very much focused on you come in, here's your weight, here's the weight you want to be, here's your handout of foods to eat and not to eat. It's way more tailored and it's way more person-centered and person-specific.
Oh, I like it. That other way sounds so generic.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's confession time for me, right? Because I have not only been a vegetarian and a vegan and a paleo advocate and a keto advocate and intermittent fasting and all these different things, but I was an influencer talking about these things. And there was a point in my life where I realized, oh my God, all of this is just an expression of one giant eating disorder or lack of, feeling like I'm doing things perfectly.
Yep.
And along the way, people just followed me all the way through it. And again, it wasn't until I was able to connect with myself and go why am I binge eating, right? Why am I doing these things? That I was able to just make decisions that served me rather than hurt me. And that was a huge change for me. It absolutely changed my life. And I'm wondering with you and your clients, so many people are showing up looking for that person to tell them what to do. But ultimately what we're kind of trying to get people to do is connect with themselves and experience themselves in a deeper way so they can answer those questions for themselves, right? How do you take people through that process?
Well, first of all, I want to say what a paradigm shift for you. What a huge, you're an influencer, you're doing all these things and you came to this awareness, that's a really big deal. So good on you. For me, if somebody's coming in and they're looking for a meal plan, right? And that's what we hear all the time. I just need you to write me a meal plan. Just
because I don't want to think about it.
Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. My response is, if it works, it would have worked. How many meal plans have you had in your life? How many diet books have you bought? How many dietitians have you gotten meal plans from, or trainers, or whoever? If it works, it would have worked, right? So what are we going to do differently? And I feel like that really gets to people, it really helps them understand, I tell people, I don't want to be the next person that gives you a meal plan that you're going to feel, that makes you feel crappy about yourself when you ultimately don't stick to it because it's not what you like or what you want to do or what fits with your lifestyle. I kind of really get people to buy into if you want it to be different, it's got to be different. And people really latch onto that. And, are there session number 4 and session number 5 when people walk in and say, oh my gosh, Christy, it's just so much easier if you give me a meal plan. I'm like, maybe, but no, we want to do work for the long term. And I find that people really resonate with that. And then my favorite saying is, I can tell you to eat a tuna fish sandwich all day long, but if you don't like tuna fish, what's the point?
What is the point? What is
So, what is the point?
You brought up something cool too that I've noticed in our own business at WeShape is that, strangely, the people who have gone through diets and gone through workout programs and done all this stuff, and now nothing's working, and it's always been about disconnecting from self and changing the way they look, and then finally they show up here and they learn to move their body and they learn to respect themselves and create space for themselves, and it's this humongous shift in the way that they've done everything. And what's interesting is it's the people who have had so many struggles that get it, right? It's the women in their 50s, 60s, 70s who are like, I've done all this stuff and it doesn't work. I'm no happier. Nothing is changing for me in a positive way. Yep. And so it's interesting to hear you say like that simple, obvious thing, right? Like, what has this done for you? What has this done for you? Like, let's do something different. And I think there's a willingness there when you've, basically tried everything and felt miserable at the end of each one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the start of a diet represents a hope, right? Like it's a hope that my body's going to be different, a hope that my life is going to be different, a hope that this one's going to work.
Well, people need to soak that in for a second, because that's big, right? Because we feel hopeless sometimes, and that gives you hope, right?
And when you say, I'm not going to diet anymore, what are you saying I'm not doing anymore?
There's no more hope for me.
Letting myself go.
And we know, right? Like there's lots of hope after that. But initially it's very much like, what do I do? This is a loss of identity of sorts. This is a loss of the thing that's kept me preoccupied for maybe decades. Now what?
100%. What now?
You got a lot more time. That's what now. You got a lot more mental space. That's what now.
Yes. When you come to the other side, you get it. Tyler, you brought up something. We were talking about this earlier with WeShape. A lot of our demographic, yes, women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And it is sort of we've gotten to this point. We've been doing the same thing over and over again and nothing's changed. What now? And because I feel like you primarily see women in, at least 30 and up. What have you seen? Because I know you even do like a little bit of body image work with your clients and helping them, make peace with the bodies that they have and tailor their eating to supporting their bodies as opposed to restricting their bodies. So what have you seen coming from, your full background that is like the difference when we're talking to these women who've kind of been through some things and kind of gone through some places and seen, have seen that the things aren't working that they've been doing? What is the difference in that mind state when you're working with them about making peace with their bodies?
So just to clarify, you're asking, is it like the process that we kind of go through, or is it their mindset shift that lets them be open to the work?
Well, both, honestly, because sometimes I do think that sometimes I don't think this work is for younger people, and so we would like it to be, right? But sometimes I don't think it is. And so in understanding the shift, maybe having more experience, and then again you being in a space where you can share your experience or glean from your experiences to help them. How does it look different for you, and how is that shift for them different?
I think that by the time people get to me, a lot of times, just because what I do, is what I do. I work in a weight neutral space with women that want to improve their relationship with food and their body. When they get to me, there's almost a lot of times a sense of desperation of I don't want to feel this way anymore. And so a lot of times they come in with an openness to, like, we have the, okay, we're going to do things different talk, but like an openness to, I'm tired of feeling this way. So that mindset is different, which I think is really cool. I think, in the actual work, in order to take people through this, and I like to kind of caveat this with, I'm not a therapist. I know exactly when I need to refer somebody to therapy. I don't work on trauma. I don't do those things, but I do talk about like history of body image. If that opens something that it's out of my scope to process, then I send that to the therapist and let them do that. I just caveat that. But for me, I really like to look at, I'm like, tell me your story. And we'll spend a whole session or two. I'm like, go back to the first time you were aware of your body. What was the first thing you remember about your body? What was the first time you heard something negative about your body? When was the first time you dieted? And we do that from their first memories on up to wherever they're at right now. And then we kind of look at how each of those things have formed whatever they believe to be their ideal body, right? So if mom said, your legs are too fat, right, as a kid, and you're constantly thinking, I need to go to the gym and work on my legs, like, let's put that together and see how that's holding you back, right? And so we do that, and we do it through food, and we do it through body, and we do it through movement, and all the messages that they've gotten, examining that, figuring out what they agree with and what they don't, and helping take those things to shape what it is they want to do for themselves in the future with food, weight, and how they perceive their body.
That's good work. That's worthy work, right?
I love it. It gets me up every day. I love it.
Absolutely. I feel the same.
Lisa, you wanted to talk about red flags. Let's touch on that before we have to
before we get off, I know you don't have as much time, so I want to make sure we do this. You had a post, and you were saying the red flag eating habits, and I think this is more so, I think, for the person who has recognized like dieting is not where I want to be, and I want to, have a healthier relationship with food in my body, and I want to nourish myself, and I don't want to be restricting and doing all these things, but diet culture is sneaky and pervasive.
That's what I wanted to say. It's sneaky, right? Because
Yes.
when you're doing it all right, I'm air quoting for the listeners here, you get praised. And you get praise, which perpetuates the toxicity that you're swimming in, right? Sorry.
No,
Take it away.
no, that's right. So what are some of those red flags that when we're trying to shift our perspective over to, an anti-diet, mindset around nourishing ourselves, what are those like little red flags, or some of those little red flags in our eating behaviors that can sort of indicate we haven't quite, graduated from diet culture or engaging in diet habits just yet?
Yeah. Some of the big ones for me are like really examining, am I restricting quantity of food or type of food, right? Like, am I counting calories? Am I limiting carbohydrates unnecessarily, right? For somebody that's not diabetic or needs to
Right.
manage that. Am I cutting out whole food groups? Am I not allowing myself to have dessert ever? Those things where there's like big sweeping ideas, right? Like I should
Right.
only eat X calories, or I should like not have carbs, or I should never have sugar. That for me is a huge red flag that the diet is still in the brain. If somebody's having a lot of mood swings, lack of flexibility in eating, anxiety around food, that's a huge red flag for me. One of my favorite questions to ask to clients is, what % of your waking hours do you spend thinking about food, weight, movement, and body? And if they say any more than 20%, that to me is a red flag.
Okay.
Right? Like, we all need to think about, when can I plan some movement, or like, what am I going to have for dinner? But if you're thinking about it more than that, that tells me that it is living in your brain a lot, If somebody has a lack of ability to go out to dinner because it's going to mess up their macros or their calories or whatever thing they're doing, they're letting their diet or their lifestyle, so to speak, interfere with their ability to have fun and enjoy their lives, right? Like, it's promoting a lower quality of life. If I see people that, again, are preoccupied with their movement, they can't take a day off of exercise, or they get really anxious, that to me is a red flag. And then, just coming from like a science and health perspective, I don't think lab work is the be all end all to telling people what their health is, because our bodies have an amazing ability to compensate for the junk we do to it and maintain homeostasis. But if somebody, gets their labs done and they have high liver enzymes from restricting, right? Or they've been following the carnivore diet and their liver enzymes and cholesterol are through the roof, right? Or their electrolytes are off because they're not eating enough. Those are all red flags to me. Those are the big things I'm going to be looking for.
I'm so curious, before we wrap, what would you say to our listeners if you could just give them one thing that would help them get out of the diet culture mentality and at least crack that door to curiosity around what it would look like to just listen to your body and, like, did it agree with the things I'm eating? Am I hungry? Am I full, right? What would be the thing that you'd want to say to them?
I would say that if somebody has been heavily into diet culture and using external locus of control over their food, it is really hard to shift that to an internal locus of control, right? That's very scary. And I think acknowledging that and saying, like, hey, this is going to be a scary process that is probably going to feel out of control at first, and just accepting that, right? Don't fight it, just accept it. And knowing that it's not always going to feel that way. Like, there's going to be a time when it doesn't feel so hard. And there's going to be a time when you don't spend hours thinking about what you have for dinner or how much weight you lost. Like, it will shift. You just got to get through the hard stuff at the first. And that's not to say that there won't be hard days forever. You know, nobody has great body image every day of their life, but it's not always going to be that hard. And in the end, it is so worth it for your quality of life.
I love that you say that. We had a call for the Feel Good Challenge that we do at WeShape the other day, and the topic was about beliefs. And one of our members shared in that call, she'd been through 5 challenges with us. And she said, today for the first day, I looked in the mirror and I had this awareness. I noticed that I wasn't criticizing myself anymore. It was just quiet, and I was just there. Just here I am. Here's my body. But it took a year. And I was like, man, if I told you we could get rid of your inner critic around your body in a year, you'd probably swallow that pill in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? But, you know, in those moments, it feels like such a long time. But it's just because people don't have tools or the motivation to keep moving forward on that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I so appreciate you saying that it isn't easy.
Oh,
It will be hard, but it's worth it.
It's
And you're
absolutely
worth
worth
it, right?
Yeah. And as somebody that's come out on the other side, I can say definitively, I would never look back.
Love that. Oh, Christy, thank you. I love talking to you. You know that it's been a great conversation. Can you please tell our listeners how they can keep up with you, how they can connect with you, how they can maybe work with you or your team?
Yeah. So on Instagram, you can follow me. My handle is at eatingdisorder.dietitian. My company's page is at enhancednutrition_dietitians. Our website is Enhanced Nutrition Associates, and it has all of our contact info on there, including what insurances we take, what states we serve, that kind of thing. So it's just a real simple form you can fill out on the website, and then we'll get you squared away and taken good care of.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for your time today and sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I so enjoyed this conversation.
Same.